I'm Matt McClure.
And I'm Francesca Maxime, and this is Currents.
What's your calling in life? Ever think about the diaconate?
I want to see if God is calling me to a different level of service.
We'll learn about a special feast day and a part of the church you may not know about.
It became very common in all of the Eastern churches to celebrate this entrance into the temple.
And the Sistene Chapel is more than just a museum, it's a working chapel. We'll show you how it's put to use. Well, good evening. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Well, we are in the year for priests. As we know, it's the year that the church takes time out to honor the men who've given up their lives to God.
But there are other vocations. We've already met some nuns and even attended a ceremony where they've professed vows to serve the church.
But another vocation that doesn't get quite as much attention is the diaconate. But it's undergone quite a revival here in the Brooklyn Diocese in the last few years.
There are nearly 200 deacons throughout Brooklyn and Queens, and unlike the priesthood, married men can become deacons. And just like priests, they serve their church in a very unique way.
Earlier this week, we attended an information session for those men in the diocese who think they might be called to it.
A deacon is a married or a single man who is already serving in the parish, feels the call to enter into a process of formation that will allow him to one day serve the church as an ordained minister.
I'm here to get more information about how to become a deacon.
I've always been interested in in doing something more in the church, and being that I'm married, this is something I can do.
I want to see if God is calling me to a different level of service, maybe as a deacon.
I can't be a priest anymore, but I still can serve God.
In September this year, we began the inquiry stage for those men who are interested in learning more about the diaconate formation program, in which we have been able to present to them the ministry of the deacon, the threefold of our service as deacons, what's entailed in terms of the formation program, with the hope that they will be in a better position to discern if this is something that they want to do or not once they apply to our formation program.
All my life I've been blessed with a lot of things.
Always interested me to do more service for the church and for other people.
I think that now I have to give something back to serve God.
We could serve in different capacities. We are called to serve in the altar, to preach the word. Some of us are serving the diocese as chaplains, hospital chaplains. Others are working in the administration of the diocese, like myself, in the diaconate formation office. Others are working in parishes alongside with the priests. So the ways in which we can contribute depends on what the needs are and also our own personal gifts. And in this way, we'll try to make ourselves available to the bishop, to the priests, as they see our gifts to be fit to serve God's people.
My wife is supportive.
She's very positive and supportive in this whole process.
I think she feels like I'm a little crazy, you know.
There will be a lot of study, homework and things, so I'll be there for him.
Todo es para el bien de nuestro matrimonio, para ir creciendo en la fe y para poder ayudar también a más personas.
The role of the wife as well as the family is extremely important. The wife has to be able to understand what his husband is getting into, what's entailed, the demands of the formation program. It's not just the men who is going to be formed, but their wives as well. Although the man is the one who is going to be ordained, he needs to have his wife's support, his wife help as he goes through the different stages, in formation and certainly once ordained. It is a call. Some of us have been called to be priests. Some others have been called to marriage life, and within the marriage life, some of us feel the call to be a deacon, to be a servant, to lead God's people and to help the priest with the pastoral care of his parishioners in a particular parish.
Well, it's great. It was nice to see so many men and their wives come out there for the information session.
Very well attended.
Very much so. And go ahead.
I'm not going to spill the beans. Go ahead.
Okay. We actually have our very own deacon right here at Currents. Deacon Greg Kandra is our news director. He's written more about the diaconate actually over on our blog.
He has. And just head over to currentsny.net and click on Riding the Wave. In the right-hand part of the screen, he often says that it's, one of the best things. And, of course, he has, us during the week, and then he has all of that kind of work on the weekends.
Right.
But he manages to do it well.
Very fulfilling thing to do. Well, stay tuned. There's much more Currents coming up straight ahead. When we return, the day's headlines, including the latest on the gay marriage debate and an interview on that very subject with our own Bishop Nicholas DiMarzio. Welcome back to Currents. I'm Matt McClure.
And I'm Francesca Maxime. Coming up just a bit later, the Sistine Chapel is about a lot more than just artwork. We'll take a closer look inside.
But first, let's have a look at the day's headlines. A prominent group of Orthodox, Catholic, and evangelical Christian leaders released a statement today calling for solidarity on moral issues. The 4,700-word document is called the Manhattan Declaration and calls for Christians to stand up for pro-life issues and against gay marriage while standing for religious liberty. The document also says the signers, some 125-plus prominent religious leaders, will not abandon their Christian consciences. Some of the original signers of the document include Philadelphia Archbishop Cardinal Justin Regali, Washington Archbishop Donald Worrell, and New York Archbishop Timothy Dolan. Well, they're searching for a compromise on the issue of gay marriage in the nation's capital. Some D.C. council members are reaching out to the Archdiocese of Washington to see if a compromise on a proposed bill allowing same-sex unions in the district is possible. The goal? To ensure Catholic Charities does not end social services it provides if the bill passes. Now, meantime, New York's highest court has ruled that the state must recognize same-sex marriages performed in other states. The ruling comes as a bill allowing same-sex marriages to be performed in New York is stalled in the state Senate. Now, earlier today, our own Natalia Ortiz spoke with Bishop Nicholas DiMarzio about the issue.
It's complicated. There's no one thing you can say that's going to change people's mind. I think in our society today, most people feel if it doesn't hurt me, let anybody do what they want. But there's more to it. You're looking at it, God's plan. Now, if you don't believe in God, you have to realize, well, marriage is a natural thing also. It's always been part of the human race, even if we don't accept that it's part of God's plan. And how can we redefine it at this stage overnight, making same-sex unions equivalent to marriage? So I think there's a problem because we see the religious values being devalued. At the same time, religious freedom will be devalued. We've got test cases already where religious freedom has been challenged because of same-sex unions and marriage and people not being willing to engage in it. For example, there was the case of this photographer who refused to photograph a wedding, but since he's in the public domain, he was sued and had to do it. So those are the kind of things that I think we're very concerned about. So we do urge people to contact your state legislators. This is not how we should redefine marriage.
Some people have accused the Catholic Church of disliking homosexuals. What do you have to say about that? People
misunderstand what we say. We hate nobody, but we can say that activities that people undertake are not good. Not good for them, not good for society. So there's a big difference between hating people or disapproving of certain acts that we know, as we see it, are not moral.
Bishop, what do you have to say to people who are gay and Catholic?
Well, we say to you, you have to live your life as God has given it to you. The jury's out on is homosexuality, same-sex attraction, something that's inherently, is it part of nature, or is it how people have been nurtured? Is it a choice, a free choice? I don't think anybody has the answer to that. But at the same time, if we don't have an answer, I don't think it's the time that this institution of marriage should be challenged by affording to persons who wish to have a contract with one another, a union with one another, the same benefits as marriage, because it will devalue marriage. And that's our point, really.
Well, that is our own Natalia Ortiz speaking with Brooklyn Bishop Nicholas DiMarzio. Well, in Washington, Senate Democrats are preparing for what is being called a crucial test vote on their version of a health care reform bill tomorrow. Saturday's vote is on whether or not to allow debate on the bill to take place on the Senate floor. Meantime, the back and forth between the White House and the U.S. Bishops' Conference continues over the issue of abortion in the health care bill. A White House spokesperson says the Senate bill maintains the status quo on abortion policy. A spokesman for the Bishops' Conference, though, called that statement ridiculous, saying this is the, quote, worst bill we've ever seen on abortion policy.
A day before he's set to meet with Pope Benedict, the head of the Anglican Church is getting some attention all by himself. In a speech in Rome, Archbishop of Canterbury Rowan Williams says the Catholic Church should rethink its position on female bishops. Williams says there's no proof that they've damaged the Church of England. He also added that the Catholic Church's refusal to ordain women was a barrier to Christian unity. Many Anglicans, however, upset by their churches allowing female priests, have said they're going to take up the Vatican's offer to convert to Catholicism. Elsewhere, an official at the Vatican is taking a bite out of the latest Twilight movie. The Twilight saga New Moon opened today in theaters. An official with the Vatican's Council of Culture says the vampire series is a moral vacuum with a deviant message and as such should be of concern. He added that it combines a mixture of excesses that is aimed at young people. And in recent years, Vatican officials have also been critical of the Da Vinci Code and Angels and Demons movies. They're two Dan Brown novels that were adapted for the big screen. For those of you who take public transportation to church, there is some good news for now. The Transit Authority's budget released earlier this week contains no fare hikes, toll increases, and service cuts. A fiscal plan also released, however, does forecast fare increases of 7.5% in both 2011 and 2013.
Well, good news for now.
For now.
We'll stay tuned. There's much more currents coming up straight ahead. Coming up tomorrow is a celebration. We'll tell you what it's all about.
It's not like a bar mitzvah or a bas mitzvah for a young girl. It's even earlier than that.
Well, tomorrow is a special feast day, but one that does not get a lot of attention. It's the presentation of the Blessed Virgin Mary. It's actually a holy day that was, at one time, more popular in Eastern Catholic churches.
So earlier this week, I had a chance to speak with somebody from an Eastern Rite Catholic church. His name is Father James Root, and he is the rector of Our Lady of Lebanon, Maronite Catholic Cathedral in Brooklyn Heights. We talked not only about the feast day itself, but also about the other rites of the Catholic Church. Well, Father James, it is so nice that you are joining us today here on Currents.
Thank you for having me.
And you are our first Eastern Rite clergy to do so, so welcome.
Thank you very much. It's an honor for me. And for my community as well.
Well, yeah, it's terrific because we were speaking a little bit earlier. You know, I have some friends that are Lebanese. You said you're part Lebanese.
Yes.
And it's a whole, you know, other side. It's a whole new thing to some people, perhaps, that, you know, they may not know more about. So you're here to talk a little bit about that. Let's start with the presentation of the Blessed Virgin Mary and that feast and why it's so important.
November 21st, the presentation. It is a very important feast in the Eastern churches. It goes back to Jewish tradition. In the book of Exodus, in the Old Testament, it states that the firstborn child was dedicated, firstborn male was dedicated to the temple. So they were pulled aside to study the scriptures and whatnot in a very special way. Well, it also became favorable that they could do the young ladies to the young girls. In the prototype of St. James, an apocryphal writing that is not part of the canonical Gospels, it states that Joachim and Anna, the parents of Mary, wanted to put her also in this program in the temple to serve. And it was Joachim, her father, who wanted to do it when she was 2 years old. Mm-hmm. And Anna said, no, not until she's 3. And so she entered then the temple. And it has become a very popular, and it's not a holy day of obligation, but it is a holy day. And so in the 6th century, from Jerusalem, from that late period of time, it became very common in all of the Eastern churches to celebrate this entrance into the temple. But not until the 14th century in the Western church that it took precedence then at that time. So it really is, it's not like a bar mitzvah or a bas mitzvah for a young girl. It's even earlier than that.
Okay.
And so it is a very important time. And we know from the scriptures that Mary knew the scriptures because of this, and she was very faithful to her Jewish traditions.
Right. And so what will take place then specifically on the 21st?
Specifically in our church, it is just basically the Divine Liturgy, and the prayers are all dedicated more to the Blessed Virgin.
Okay.
But there's no special ceremony per se for the feast day.
Okay. Tell us a little bit more then about also, you know, it's celebrated by both the Roman and the Eastern Rite. So
Correct.
Tell us more about the Eastern Rite. You know, what is it for people that don't really know, and how does it differ?
As soon as people hear, you know, Father, you're from the Maronite Catholic Church, are you Orthodox? And I say, no. No, Orthodoxy means that those who are not united with Rome. In the Roman Catholic Church, there are 22 rites. The Latin rite, which most people associate with Catholicism with, is only one rite of the Catholic Church. There are 21 rites that are of the Eastern tradition, and they stem from 5 different centers of early Christianity.
Okay.
Jerusalem, the mother of all churches, as we refer to; Rome, the Latin rite; the Gregorian rite, also, which I know, the Ambrosian rite, excuse me, that is also an older rite of the church. But then there was also Antioch, which the Maronite Church comes from that tradition. Constantinople, Alexandria, also in the east. So
it's a history lesson right there.
Yes, exactly.
Geography and a history lesson.
They were the 5 known centers of the world, and they were centers of commerce, centers of culture. So the Eastern churches, when people say, what's the difference between the Maronites, for instance, and Roman Catholic, Latin rite? It's basically tradition and the celebration of liturgy. So it's cultural, linguistic, more than anything. We profess the same Nicene Creed that everyone else would in the Catholic Church, but it's the expression, the way we would go about it.
Go about doing it. And do you speak masses perhaps ever in different languages as well?
Many languages. The Maronite Church, the official language of our church is Syriac, Aramaic, the language of Christ. And it is still the mother language of our church, but we use the vernacular. So we pray a lot of Arabic in our Divine Liturgy in most of our churches, because we have so many immigrant families from Lebanon and Syria who have migrated here to the United States. If you were to go to Canada, the liturgy will be in French as well.
Yeah, so there's a big diversity. There's also something that's a little bit different as far as the married priests within the Maronite Church, right?
Correct. Although here in the United States, back in the 1930s, it was agreed upon that the Eastern Catholic priests would not be married in the United States. However, in Lebanon, we do have married clergy, and in Syria. But you must be ordained. You cannot be ordained a deacon yet. You have to be married first, and then you can be ordained. So in other words, if you go through the diaconate and the priesthood, and then all of a sudden you fall in love with somebody, well, you can't do that. You have to be married prior to the diaconate and prior. And it's really amazing, because in our tradition, most married men were chosen from within the community and asked to be a priest because they were exemplary in their
individuals.
Exactly.
Interesting. Well, Father James, this has been fascinating. Really, it's a discussion that I could have with you for much longer, but we don't have more time for that right now. But perhaps you can come back on again to talk a little bit some more.
I would love it.
All right.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much.
God bless.
So you learned something?
Yeah, a lot actually. I'm going to keep it all straight in my head, you know. I mean, but it's very interesting. I love the fact that the official language of their church is Aramaic.
Yeah.
That's kind of different, but they do a lot in Arabic, he said. So there's a place for folks whose native language might be Arabic to go and to have mass there. So that's
22 rites, and Latin rite is only one of them.
Right.
And so, you know, you have all this other stuff. And it's an education. I love the diversity within that, because he said really what his fundamental point was that the changes and the differences are really more cultural than anything, which I think it speaks to, like, you know, being able to speak Arabic and having people from Lebanon come in and feel at home. So it's nice.
It's a very neat thing.
Well, stay tuned. There is much more current straight ahead.
Coming up, there's history in more than just the art at the Sistine Chapel. Welcome back to Currents. New research shows the Shroud of Turin, believed to be Christ's burial cloth, is authentic.
A Vatican researcher claims a nearly invisible text on the shroud proves that, in fact, it is real. In a new book, historian Barbara Frail says she used computer images to enhance images of the words. She says the words include the name Jesus Nazarene in Greek. Frail says no Christian in the Middle Ages would have written Christ's name without referring to his divinity.
Well, many people know the Sistine Chapel for its ceiling. But it's much more than a museum. It is actually a functioning chapel. We get more from Carol Glatz and Cindy Wooten of the Catholic News Service.
This week, the Vatican Museums hosted the launch of The Painted Word, a book about how the Bible comes alive on the frescoed walls and ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. In fact, the biblical high points are all there, from the creation of the world and Adam receiving life from the hand of God, to the final judgment when the holy rise to glory with Christ and the damned are flung into the netherworld.
Biblical stories of love and betrayal, creation and destruction, miraculous births and violent deaths have inspired artists for centuries. The scenes obviously serve an educational purpose to illustrate the truths of faith, but they are designed to be much more than that. They're meant to help uplift a weary human spirit and make people stop in awe before the beauty of God's creation. And the Sistine Chapel, the scenes serve as a dramatic backdrop for some rather significant events.
The first, obviously, is the election of a new pope. The world's cardinals gather in the chapel to pray and deliberate about who is called to be the next vicar of Christ. After the ballots are counted, they are burned in a stove set up in a corner of the chapel. The smoke from the burning ballots signals to the waiting world whether the church has a new pope or not.
And the Sistine Chapel itself can lead to new art. Pope John Paul II wrote a book of poems, which the Vatican published in 2003. One of the poems was set in the Sistine Chapel. The Pope described the chapel as the book of beginnings, Genesis. He said Michelangelo penned the book not with his words, but with the richness of a riot of colors. We enter in order to read it, passing from wonder to wonder.
One annual event filled with wonder, and usually a bit of noise, is the Pope's baptism of newborn babies. Just after Christmas, on the feast of the baptism of the Lord, a dozen infants are welcomed into the Catholic Church. Often, of course, Michelangelo's frescoes serve as an illustration for the Pope's homily as he pours water over the heads of the little ones and initiates them into the Christian life.
Now, Pope Benedict has been using the chapel even more often than Pope John Paul did. When he asked the Ecumenical Orthodox Patriarch to address the Synod on the Bible last year, he chose the Sistine Chapel as the setting. And the Pope threw an 85th birthday celebration in the chapel for his brother, Monsignor Georg Ratzinger. The Pope's gift to his brother, who was the longtime director of the famous Regensburg Boys Choir, was a performance of a Mozart Mass.
Well, this weekend at the Sistine Chapel, Pope Benedict will meet with artists from around the world.
And much closer to home this weekend, the Basilica of the Immaculate Conception in Washington, D.C. is celebrating its 50th anniversary. It is the largest Catholic church in North America and one of the 10 largest churches in the whole world.
Absolutely gorgeous, as is the Sistine Chapel, of course. And I need to go to Rome. My goodness, it's like, I mean, seriously, I've never been, but I really want to go because, I mean, obviously there's just such a rich religious history there, and it's the center of the Catholic Church. And the architecture is just gorgeous.
Well, be careful. It's like the Vatican. It's not really, you know what I mean. The Vatican is like, I know, I'm just teasing because sometimes they'll get you on that.
Right.
You just have to dress appropriately if you're a girl, if you go, and you know, if you're a guy as well. They don't like tourists and, you know, cut off shorts and that kind of thing.
Right.
But it is beautiful, and you definitely want to enjoy, you know, the architecture and the art, but also you do have a feeling of reverence when you go there, because there are things that happen there on a regular basis that don't happen anywhere else.
Yeah, there you go. I'll be sure and wear my long skirt if I
go.
Sorry, I couldn't resist. I just had to.
Okay.
Well, that's it for this edition of Currents. You can always watch us online. CurrentsNY.net is the address.
And you can email us. The address is drop us a line at currentsny.net. So for all of us here at Currents, I'm Francesca Maxime.
And I'm Matt McClure. Thank you so much for watching. Put on your long skirt and have a great weekend.